We are now streaming on YouTube. And now we're being recorded. All right, so we can call to order at 7 p.m. I don't believe there's any changes to the agenda, but I will entertain any if anyone has additions or changes. Seeing none. All right, declaration of conflict of interest or pecuniary interest. Seeing none. All right, delegations, presentations, or petitions. We do have Mark Bishop from the RCMP here this evening. So Mark, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. So for May, I missed April as well, but I believe you got the report. So if there's any questions about April at the end, feel free to ask me. As for May, it's actually the first month since I've been coming here that I actually say we've got a slight decrease in calls, which is always good to hear. So the total calls for May was 384, which is down from 421. So there's a little bit of a decrease there at 40. There was 13 reports of domestic violence, which resulted in 9 people being charged. 15 reports of impaired driving, which led to 1 individual being charged and 2 issued the driving suspensions. As well, you may have noticed that there was a couple check stops conducted, and they were done in partnership with municipal enforcement, which was definitely appreciated. There were several warnings and tickets issued, and 1 individual was also arrested on an outstanding warrant. As for the community piece, a couple of our officers attended Ingamo Hall. I fortunately didn't get a picture of that. They were showing off their scooter skills with the kids. Constable Helgeson attended the community justice meeting, and that's with Victim Services Restorative Justice. And then also municipal enforcement really took the lead on the bike rodeo recently. So a couple of our officers just stopped by throughout the week there, but that was really a municipal enforcement initiative, which was definitely well received. There's 2 notable occurrences for the month, I guess, that gained a little bit of media attention. That was the 56-year-old gentleman who was located deceased on May 12th. And then the next one was May 27th with the 47-year-old woman, unfortunately also deceased. The 2 aren't related, but both got a bit of media attention. Court has resumed now that the COVID-19 outbreak is, I guess, somewhat passed in Yellowknife. That was the one at the school there, which unfortunately postponed the court matters for the month of May in most of the communities, but they have resumed now in June. Other than that, that's about it. I'll open up to any questions. Also, the staffing process is still ongoing for the position I'm in, but they did extend me until September 1st. So I'll be here until then for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Are there any questions about the report? Seeing none. All right. Thank you for your time and for being here to present. Much appreciated, and keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you. You know where to reach me if anything comes up.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, so we can move on then. On Wednesday night, we have a message at this point for the grads, but we'll do that then. So on to public question period. SAO Hood, have we received anything for this evening?
I have not.
Okay, thank you. And on to the adoption of the minutes of the May 26, 2021 council meeting. Is there any questions about the minutes or comments? Seeing none. Sorry, my screens are jumping around. And on to the action items list then. Any questions or comments here? Councillor Wood. If you're talking, you're muted. Oh, Clarence, you're muted.
Okay, item number, sorry about that. Item number 12, addressing public intoxication, as was raised by Councillor Wainman, I believe, a meeting or two ago. It's closing for the summer or has closed. Have we had any progress on keeping the center open, or is there any alternative plans in place?
So I've been involved in a couple of meetings that were headed by the mental health working group, I believe they're called, which is a branch off from the interagency. And so they had hosted a meeting, I want to say 2 Fridays ago now, to see kind of what immediate needs were and how different organizations could come together to try to fill some of those gaps. So I took on doing some food stuff for them. So there's been a hot meal provided every day. But as far as the warming center itself and opening back up or anything like that, I do not believe there has been any progress made. My understanding is that the warming center itself is in search of new board members, which I believe if you want to express interest, you can just get in contact with them at this point. And they will be also looking at doing a new election. As for opening the doors, I don't have much more detail other than that they are closed for the summer. Sorry, I'm kind of scattered on this just because it's not exactly my area of expertise, but the group that had come together to look at meals and emergency needs was pulling together sleeping bags and things for people, but I don't have a proper update on where those groups are at this time.
Okay, I realize that local organizations are stepping up and trying to do something, but as we all know, the homeless is a territorial and federal responsibility. Have they been approached to actually accept their responsibility and do something, or are they sitting on their hands again?
So part of the understanding that I have is that the warming shelter normally does close in the summer anyway. Sorry, the warming center. The homeless shelter is open as normal. They're accepting sober residents each night of the week. Although it seems extreme, I guess, this year, it's not out of the ordinary that they be closed during the summer months. That being said, the colder weather and the idea that maybe they need to be open longer is something that we can have conversations about. But as of now, I don't believe there's any, I don't think anyone's coming to open the doors anytime soon.
Yeah, I realize the homeless shelter itself is open. However, the warming shelter in itself is a homeless shelter, as we all know. The street people, people who drink in this case, have nowhere to go. So, we seem to be ignoring a large segment of the homeless population. And I'm not saying the town of Inuvik is ignoring them, but the territorial government and federal as a whole are ignoring this segment of our population, and something has to be done. The summers here are just as cruel in their own way as the winters, with the mosquitoes and so on and so forth. They're taking shelter under buildings everywhere they can. And I don't know, there's got to be an end to the suffering somewhere. Anyway, I've said my piece. Thank you. I realize you're doing everything you can. Keep doing it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Anything further on the action items? All right, on to new business. The presentation of fiscal 2021 final operating and capital budget. And I will hand over to SAO Hood for his presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Kulikowski. I'm just trying to get this. Hope everybody can see that now and hear me. So I guess I'm pleased to present to you the proposed Town of Inuvik final operating and capital budget for fiscal 2021. While this year's changes between the interim and final budget were not as drastic as last year, there have been some significant adjustments. With this presentation, I trust the information provided will allow Council to approve the revenue and expenditures for fiscal 21. I want to thank the directors and managers for their assistance in developing what we believe is an achievable operational and capital budget. As you can see, we've gone from a deficit of $143,188 presented in the interim budget to the balanced budget in front of you. During the time we presented the interim budget and this proposal, we've been in receipt of additional funding for capital expenditures and also some operational funding that was not anticipated at the time. This, coupled with staff vacancies and improved operating efficiencies, has contributed to the bottom line change. From our presentation point of view, I've adjusted Department 60 and Department 90, the fiscal, to provide what I feel is a better representation of capital expenditures and associated funding with improved separation of capital from operations. As a result, some of the figures I will provide in this meeting may not be quite the same as when you look on the interim budget, but I can assure you they do not change the overall figures. I'll try and summarize the changes in this presentation and then answer any questions you may have. So to begin with, you see summary comparison of operating revenue and expenses. As you can see, there's a significant net surplus. This surplus, however, is used to cover the capital expenditure funding deficit. So some revenue changes that we've had from the interim budget, thank you. You'll see basically 6 major adjustments. One is the property tax reduction from 4% to 3.5%, plus revised assessments, resulting in a $64,000 reduction in revenue. We've received additional COVID restart funding of $130,000. Development permits increase of $60,000 as a result of actual fees already collected in 2021. Highway rescue funding of $37,000. Water and sewer fee increase of $20,000. And land sales revenue of $124,500, but with that comes associated costs of $111,000 for a net increase of $13,500. So keep up with my own talk here, sorry. While the total operating expenditures are overall essentially the same, there are some areas where reductions have offset any increases. We'll attempt to identify any major items as a review each department, which I will go now. And obviously the first one here is Department 10. Typically, this department will show a large surplus as the property tax revenue and other general revenue and costs are contained within the department. This surplus has increased by $65,700 despite the reduction in the property tax revenues. The major notes is the reduced property taxes revenue of $64,000, an increased recoupment cost though of $36,500, increased insurance of $42,000. We've had additional COVID funding though of $130,000, plus the development permit fees that I talked about before of an increase in revenue of $60,000. Moving on to the Protective Services Department 20. Overall, the initial deficit for the department is being reduced by $75,000. Contributing to this major is the highway rescue funding of $37,000, plus reduction in staff costs just due to vacancies of $38,000. For Department 30, the Public Services, there has been a small change in the deficit, increasing by $7,000, primarily due to the major repairs that we had to make at the homeless shelter earlier in the year, and they amounted to close to $8,000. Number in Environmental Department 40, as with Department 30, there was basically had a small increase in the deficit of $10,000. There was a decrease in anticipated tipping fees, giving a net decrease of $35,000, a decrease in the private lot cleanup of $35,000, an increase in solid waste collection fees of $40,000, and a decrease in the solid waste operations cost of $10,000. Economic and Development Tourism Department number 50. There were very minimal changes. The deficit was reduced by $5,221. The major contributing factor is there were some small adjustments in the salary, primarily due to the Northern Allowance change. So next, I would like to talk about Department 60. This is where I've made the changes, as you may have noticed in the presentation of the department budget, to better separate the operational aspect from the capital expenditure portion. For the interim budget, the department was showing an operational surplus of $215,000. And under the proposed final budget, this would increase by $2,500. Major factors for this would be adjustments to the usage fees that, based on the current usage and predicted out to year end, is an increase of $19,000. However, there is an increase in salary costs due to some step increases that were not accounted for in the interim budget that amount to additional $21,696. However, we have a reduction in heating costs just through some more efficiencies of about $5,000. Moving on to the Community Service Department 70, the overall department operating deficit was reduced, however, by $140,277. But I will comment that this is still a department that is affected by the public health order in what we can and cannot do, and it does still have that effect. However, some of the major to reduce that deficit is we received additional COVID funding of $24,000. We've reduced staff costs due to paternal leaves, northern allowance, and also some vacancies, which has resulted in a $65,000 reduction in cost. And one of the bigger ones is continued performance efficiencies, resulting in reduced utilities costs of $50,000. We have made some of the salary adjustments to the continued pool closure, and we are now anticipating the pool opening in the fall. Again, however, we are being bitten by the supply chain issues because of COVID. For the library, which is Department 71, overall, we've taken the operating deficit and reduced it by $40,000. Primarily, this is we received some additional $5,000 plus a salary reduction due to vacancies of a net increase, net of increased casual labor due to the vacancies of a reduction of $35,297 in costs. Department 80, which is the land department, overall department operating surplus increased by $13,200. This is a major contributing factor, obviously, as we had some land sales net this year, and the net of those sales is the $13,200. Finally, the fiscal, which is Department 90, and this is the operations portion. There is, like Department 60, I've changed some of the presentation you would have seen between and the classification of some of the revenues between operating where they should have been or in capital where they should have been, and not kind of mixed up with the revenues in the operations. However, there are no changes for this department from an operating revenue and expenditure point of view. So basically that concludes my comments regarding the operating portion of the town and our general operations. Next, I'd like to talk about the changes in the capital budget. First of all, I'm hoping the revised format is provide a clearer view for you of where the funding for capital projects come from. And there have been some changes and additions to the capital budget since the interim budget. Some projects that were scheduled to be concluded in late 2020 and not included in the 2021 interim budget have been held over to this fiscal year for various reasons. All projects carried over, however, will be funded from reserves set aside specifically for those projects. Those items are the SCADA system, tourism gateway sign, the homeless shelter roof, the sidewalks, the fire hall exhaust system, the Brainerd Road upgrade. However, that one depends on funding, obviously. Some road improvements and the town office energy upgrades. We have two new capital projects that we are proposing in this interim budget. The first one is the water treatment glycol heat exchanger. That one is 100% externally funded. And the second one is the tourism building supplies. We received through ITI a 75-25 contribution agreement for that. So this next slide may be a little hard to read. I'm not too sure how to show, but and kind of gets mixed up in the coloring and stuff like that, but I didn't have time to make it real fancy. But I don't know if anybody can see my pointer because I'm still new at this, believe it or not. But what this slide is showing is where our expenditures are going and where the money's coming from for the capital. Up here we have what's called the, where's my pointer? Oop. Anyways, we have capital expenditures. I'm going to see. There we go. Capital expenditures. So we have the community infrastructure. You'll see some of these have some carried forward. The community infrastructure, gas tax, those two. The reason those numbers are large is due to the Utilidor project funds allocated to that from last year that have now been moved. So other than that, sorry, that's Macca calling. Next, we've got, sorry. We've got, I think that she's just telling me all the Aklavik residents have finally gone home. So we got them off today. So I know as a community infrastructure, gas tax, those carry forwards, and then you'll see the allocation. And then there's just a breakdown of how the funding is being sent. And so leaving where we are. And then if you'll notice up in the top right, close to the right on the utility replacement, there is under other funding, the $1.1 million. If you actually look at the capital budget or the summary of the budget, that deficit, that is the deficit, and that's where the operational surplus is going. Again, I apologize for the phone going off in the middle of the meeting. With that, I guess I will entertain any questions the council may have regarding the budget presented to you.
Great, thank you, Grant. Does council have any questions? Deputy Mayor Barlock, and then Councillor Wood.
I guess in some ways a bit of a general question. This is kind of an issue of timing. Obviously, we're expecting a new version of the Emerging Wisely document to come out on Wednesday. And depending on what is in there, whether we may anticipate any changes in some of these numbers, things like community services, where if we're allowed to sort of open up some of the facilities more, where we may be able to realize a bit more revenue from some of our things like the gym. Once we pass this budget, this is essentially final for the year, or is there, even if we do pass it, are there opportunities later on to make some more fine-tuned adjustments as we sort of realize what things may look like? Because there's still quite a bit of uncertainty over what exactly things are going to look like in the next, 2 months, 6 months. Yeah, it's a bit of a general question.
I guess what I could say is it is a budget. So therefore, at the end of the year, that everything's not going to be quite the same as what we think it is. There's no rules and regulations. Where we would come to council if there would be a change would be anything in the capital budget if a capital item came up. But as far as the operating side of it, if again, the only area where I see that we could get more potential revenues would be as if the fitness center was opened up more. However, we are getting rentals. We are, and with the ice rentals and things like that, that really didn't hurt us quite as much as we thought it might. So I think overall, it is again it is a budget. I don't think there's a need to go back, because if you do that, then you're constantly changing it, and then what's the use of doing it?
Yeah, no, I guess to frame my question, I'm thinking specifically with respect to the mill rates. I know we brought it down from what we initially proposed, but if we were able to realize a significant enough portion of revenue that was not anticipated just because things are going to change very soon, potentially, is there an opportunity, like once we pass this budget, those mill rates are essentially set for this year. There's no opportunity to revisit that later and potentially make a slight adjustment to that, sort of how I'm framing that question.
Oh, sorry. Yes. No. Once the bylaw is passed, that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Where you may potentially have an opportunity is the next fiscal year. If you house and have a bigger surplus, then you might be able to, from that, take that surplus in and bring that into and reduce the tax increase the next year, the following year. But you cannot go back under the PATA Act. You can't go back and change it.
Yeah. Okay. That was sort of my understanding too. I guess I just want to make sure I understood it correctly. So, okay. So maybe a little bit of pain this year, but potentially could realize a bit more love next year for the new council.
Could be. Yes.
Okay.
I guess I would just quickly point out too that in the interim budget that we were presented in December, we actually were faced with a deficit. And so the additional funding that's come in and the ways in which we've been able to reduce costs, we've actually both removed that deficit and been able to reduce that property tax rate by 0.5%. So I think kudos to SAO Hood and the staff for that, because I know we were we were we were concerned at the time, but we knew that they'd be able to work some magic, and clearly they have. So thanks, Grant, and to your staff as well. And Councillor Wood, you had a question?
I did have, but Deputy Mayor Barlick already asked it. Anyway, just take the opportunity like you did to thank Grant and the staff for an excellent presentation on the budget. I was glad to see the taxes actually went down from what we had anticipated they would be. So all in all, it's a good news budget. Thank you.
If I may, I forgot to put it in the slides, and I humbly apologize. I'll try to get a few things done. Just so on a 3.5%, that brings in, and you have to be covered. I think you're tired of me hearing me say this, but you have to be careful when you look at percentages versus actual dollar figures. In our case, when you have such a small sample size, but 50% at the 3.5%, 50% of the residential properties in town will have an annual increase of $83.46 or less. That's basically taking the median. So 50% of the properties would be $83 or less for the year with that 3.5% tax increase. A 1% tax increase gets us approximately $55,000. This 3.5% on a straight increase of tax revenue is $197,000.
Thank you. Of a $14 million budget, right?
Right.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Barlick?
Sorry, it just got me thinking of something else here too. I don't know if it was in the summary at the beginning or somewhere embedded in the document, but it talked to about, I guess, some of our operational reserves and how they are kind of at the state where they're kind of hitting the minimum of where we want them to be before you start getting into needed for emergency operations or emergency situations. Did I understand that correctly? Are we sort of kind of right? Our operational reserves are largely depleted at this point, except for, again, sort of when we get to a point where we're at an emergency type of situation, and that we're slowly going to try to start building that back up.
Currently, our operational reserves is around $1 million, which in the big picture is not a lot. If you get one big hit, the other thing those reserves are used for is there may be some development that we may have to do. One of the things we're realizing here soon is we may have to, we talk about the old utility system doing it. We are running out of lots up in Carmichael. And at some point in time, we're going to have to open up that other development. And somewhere there's going to have to be some money to, and that's where some of this could come from, these reserves, because some of that is from land sales. And that typically would go back. And yes, you can recoup the money over time for the building of it, but contractors don't want to wait 20 years to get paid, kind of a thing. So that's another thing with the reserves, and it doesn't take much to chew up $1 million. All we would need is for example, a large breakage in the utility system or something like that as well.
Yeah. And I'm not advocating to dip into that reserve or anything. I essentially just want to understand fiscally we're kind of right at the minimum of where we want to be to feel relatively comfortable in the state we're in. But essentially, you know, opportunities to build that reserve fund up will be looked at going forward, obviously by the next councils. I would also just like to highlight, even though a lot of things were pushed over from last year to this year, like we got almost a $13 million capital budget expenditure this fiscal year. So I think that's really something impressive for our community, that we have a lot of money being pumped out for improvements to our infrastructure and adding new to things. So I think that's also something to highlight, that we got a lot of really good things going on.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from council on the budget at this time? No shaking heads. All right, thank you very much, SEO Hood, for your presentation. And we can move on to item 9.1 under the bylaws. which is an amendment to the community plan. This is third reading. Are there any questions on this item? Seeing none. All right, thank you. And then on to the 2021 annual tax billing bylaw. Of course, we passed this bylaw after we passed the budget, and so I will see, are there any other questions on this bylaw at this time? And again, seeing none. All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to department head reports. The first report on the docket is the planning and development report. Were there any questions on this report? Deputy Mayor Bartlett.
It's just with a quick question with respect to the denial of the Parks Canada proposal for Carmichael Drive. The development fee and that's not reimbursed, and we still maintain that as like a deposit on the, because we denied their request for that construction for that permit. So did they get their money back in that respect, or do we keep that at the town? I'm not sure.
To be honest, I'm not sure either, because we've never had it happen before. So I will, we'll check. I would say that it is probably reimbursable, only because council turned it down.
Yeah, that's what I guess I wanted to understand better, so that our income from those development permits may be slightly less than what's actually listed if that money gets sent back.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We'll look forward for an update for you next meeting. Any other questions on the planning and development report? Seeing none. On to 10.2, the community services report. Any questions, comments, discussion? Deputy Mayor Bartlett.
I saw in there we had a couple folks pass the Canadian Playground Safety Institute inspector course. So do we now have certified playground inspectors in town, meaning we won't have to bring in other people to certify and inspect playgrounds as they're needing inspections, or if new ones are built in the future?
Maybe we'll ask Director Selmier.
That's correct. They're certified through the Canadian Playground Safety Institute and we have purchased the inspection kit, and so they can go through each playground and make sure that each is set properly to according to all the specifications that playgrounds have to have. And so if we did institute any new playgrounds, then they would be able to, usually there's an inspection with the firm that puts in the playground, but then following that, they would be able to upkeep those inspections.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, because I know in the past, at least for some of the playgrounds, including the GNWT ones, they've had to bring people in from out of town. So if we can handle some of that within the community, I think that's a much better approach. So glad to see it happening. Would we be able to do inspections on GNWT playgrounds as well with our workers? Could they be brought in to do that work? Do you know?
That's something that we would have to take through insurance and legal to see, what our liabilities would be in that respect. I know a lot of other different communities haven't gone that way, just because if you make that mistake, then you bear the liability for it. We have enough playgrounds of our own. So I don't know, it's something that we could explore.
Yeah, just potentially a way to, again, fee for service, to have our workers do some of that work at the school, and any of the territorial parks that have playgrounds in them may be an opportunity to get a little bit of revenue maybe at some point. But yeah, I guess the liability issue has to be clarified.
Yes, great, thank you. Any further questions from council? Seeing none. All right, on to the SAO's report. Any questions or comments, discussion? Councilor Wood, go ahead.
This time I unmuted myself first. Yeah, just a question, Grant. I noticed one of the items you discussed was the bear situation. Could you tell me what it is right now, and is the dump closing or what?
Certainly, like the main part of the meeting there was just going forward for the next few years, what they were asking about what the town plan is. We are monitoring the situation at the solid waste facility at this time. There hasn't been a lot of bear activity for whatever the reason that we're aware of. Usually E&R will let us know, or we are in constant contact with the solid waste operator. And once we feel that it is getting to the point from a safety point of view, we will then close the facility to the scavenging and etc.
Okay, thanks, Grant.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? See none. All right, on to the capital projects report. Questions, comments, discussion. I know we kind of just went over some stuff. Deputy Mayor Bartlett, go ahead.
Just a quick question with the utilidor replacement. Have we figured out whether we're going to have any supply issues with getting the supplies in to do the work? I see they've taken the casing off of some of the utilidor down by Home Hardware behind the warehouses there. So do we have that all sorted out? They're going to be able to proceed as planned?
Yes, they will. We've had they've been in constant contact with us, and they have the piping for the project. There's one glycol or the heat from the power plant to the water treatment plant that they're working on. But other than that, the main water and that, and maybe Rick, Councillor Campbell or Director Campbell could, I know he may have better information than I on it.
Yeah, I'll just add to that the reason we give them the go-ahead is because we're quite confident that they will have the supply issues solved, and we will. The only issue we have is, as Grant said, the heating loop from NCPC for the waste heat. We may not be able to get all of that, but we have ways of solving that. So that's why we've started the project, is because we're confident it can be finished. So
Great. That's great news. Thank you.
yes, it is.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on the capital projects report? See none. All right, on to the protective services report. Questions or discussion? See none. All right, on to the strategic priorities chart. I did
Can I
some.
interrupt? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make note that for the economic development tourism, due to some circumstances, the Director Chalice wasn't able to get the report in, but she will have one in unless you have some questions. But she will have one in for both months for the next set of council meetings, and possibly even the late June meeting. However, she's busy with our flagship product, the show. So.
Great, thank you, S.A. Hood. I forgot to mention that part. But if there are any questions tonight for Director Chalice, she is on the line. Seeing none. All right, so then we can move on to the strategic priorities chart. I did send an email this afternoon in regards to the chart. I don't know if you've had a chance to review it yet. We can discuss now, or we can wait. Open to either. If anyone has any comments or questions. Councillor Barlock, Deputy Mayor Barlock.
I guess we know the HR manual is coming out fairly soon. The Parks and Trails plan. Do we have any update on where that's at? We have it listed as February, so we're definitely well past that.
I'll have to ask SAO Hood.
Unfortunately, I'm going to ask Director Campbell, because I believe we have a rudimentary plan or something close to a plan. So Rick, can you bail me out, please?
Yes, we've started. It's underway. It's not complete yet, though. So sorry.
It's all right. I guess just while we're going through the items, the environmental town practices review as well. It had a TBA date. So do we have any update there?
Sorry, if I could just, we have a draft complete. We're just working on getting it more complete. So
That's for the environmental or for the parks and trails?
for the parks and trails, yes.
Okay, thanks. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rick. So then I will ask the question to SEO Hood about the environmental practices review.
That one, just, I guess due to resources availability, just has been put on the back burner a little bit. I'll be perfectly honest on that one.
And then the ICSP update.
Ditto.
All right.
There really is the ICSP. I will have something here. It's a bit of an interesting document, to say the least, to try and go through. But I will definitely have something here potentially for July.
Okay. And then the school zones, parks and playgrounds, and speed limits. Again, it was a TBA item. I know that it had come forward once earlier and council asked for it to go back again. Do we have any timeline for that one?
Not yet.
Okay, so I guess my question then is, my understanding is the HR manual is we're looking at July to have it released to staff. Would the other items be appropriate to be dated for August then, or do you feel like any of them would be completed sooner? Just so that we have reasonable dates on our timeline.
The environmental review, I honestly, to do it properly, would be more in the fall time range.
Okay.
To do it properly, as far as, and that, yes, the HR manual, we're hoping for July. We're close on it. As far as, yeah, I guess that's where we're at. The ICSP, I hope to have done for July.
Okay. All right, so back to council then. Any other questions, suggestions, conversation? All right, well, we can come back to it on Wednesday night. Like I say, please review the email that I sent earlier and we can have more conversation on the item. We're kind of at the point where we don't want to add any new things. Clearly, we need some time to finish the items we already have on the list. I would like to identify that if we were to complete all 5 that are currently there, we will have completed 14 out of our strategic priorities over our term, plus all the day-to-day items that have come up in issues and projects. And so that, I think that's something that we can be very proud of and look forward to trying to finish off this list together. So if there are no other questions on the strategic priorities then, which I'm not seeing any hands raised, we can move on. Oh, the Aurora Research Institute research notifications were just an information item. And then on to council concerns. Are there any concerns this evening? Deputy Mayor Bartlett.
I guess I just wanted to bring up the apparent encampment that's in the bushes along First Street up between the town office and the Dome. I don't know if people have driven up there and looked in the bushes there. There's a small trail and there is a ton of garbage in there. Looks like people have been staying in there even throughout the winter, because there was some sign of some tarps and stuff in there even in wintertime, and a trail going in. I've never actually seen anyone going in and out of there, but there was probably a dozen garbage bags worth of garbage in there, and there had been a big tarp shelter set up. It's visible now because there's no leaves on the trees. Once the growth comes back in, most of that stuff won't be able to be seen, but it's actually really bad. And we may want to have whether someone from the town or get environmental health involved to go in there and look, but it looks like it's been being used probably by homeless people, I would imagine. But I don't recall ever seeing anyone go in or out of there, but it's pretty bad and it's pretty visible at the moment. And maybe it's something we should try to deal with, or at least get an understanding of what's going on in there, because it looks like it's been used for a while. And I don't know who's in there or what they're doing, but it doesn't look very good.
Okay, thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Yeah, it's right along First Street in the forested area in front of the dome.
Okay.
As you go about halfway up that forested area, that you'll see a little trail in there, and in there is just garbage strewn throughout the whole area. And last time I walked by there, there had been a green tarp and stuff sent up in the back, looked kind of like a little shelter, rain shelter or something. So, and I know in the wintertime, it seemed like there had been some blankets and stuff in there. So it didn't seem as bad as in the winter, but look, seeing it now, it's pretty bad in there. So we should try to maybe get an understanding of what's going on in there and whether there's people that need help.
Okay, thank you. And anything further under council concerns?
Yeah, could I just make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Miro.
So I just want to thank yourself and Grant and the multitude of staff who helped out with the Aklavik evacuees. As you know, I was at the meeting Sunday, and I was so impressed with how quickly people were responding and being creative and meeting everybody's needs. So thank you so much. And I know you guys kept at it all week. In fact, until today when people went home. It's greatly appreciated.
Here, here, Councilor Merrill. Good job. I'll clap out loud this time.
Yeah, our staff is amazing. They help others at the drop of a hat. So good job. All right. Any other items under council concerns then? No. All right. We do not have in camera this evening, so we can adjourn. We'll come back